So here's something I bet we all have in common. I'm kind of ready for things to get back to normal, aren't you? I mean, it's sort of been a break. I mean, for some people, it's been fun to have a break, but for other people, it's just 100% stress all the time. And we're somewhere on that continuum, but for the most part, I think we're all ready for things to get back to normal. But in light of what we've experienced in the last couple of weeks, and in light of what we've learned, it would probably be a shame for us to just go back to the normal. So right now, I mean, there are a lot of people talking about the new normal. In fact, I bet you've spoken about the new normal. But now, as you know, some of the new normal, it's kind of been forced on us. But here's the thing, and here's what we're going to talk about for the next 3 weeks. If we're wise, we will pause and ask the question, well, what have I learned? And what have we learned? And what do we want to carry forward? In fact, here's something I think we've all learned, that the producers of the Mad Max movies, you might remember Mel Gibson from the 80s, maybe the early 90s, or our very own Charlize Theron a few years ago in Fury Road. But the producers of Mad Max had it wrong. Because here's what we've all learned. The most valuable commodity during an apocalypse is not oil. It's what? It's toilet paper. And I think somebody really should make a movie about that. And of course, the perfect title would be Game of Thrones. But that's already taken. Anyway, so the question we're going to ask for the next few weeks is, how can we take what we've learned and carry it into the future? Or to the title of the series, how can we be better for it? How can we be better as a result of what we've experienced? How can we be better for what we've just experienced? And I think if you don't stop and if I don't stop and ask this question, we're going to forget about it. And it would be a shame because pain without gain really is a shame. Now I realize that some of you're not ready for me to ask that question because your response to me is like, Morgan, hey, I can't think about how to be better for it because I'm still in it. In fact, I'm just beginning to suffer the consequences of what we have been experiencing, of what we've been going through. So thanks, but I just can't begin to ask the question, how can I be better for it? Because I'm still right in the middle of it. But I just want to push back on that a little bit. And I realize I'm stepping out because I don't know your circumstances. I don't know your pain. I don't know what you're going through right now. I know this has affected you and your family specifically, but here's what I do know. If we don't pay attention, we will not benefit from it. And our tendency is going to be to rush back to the old normal and miss the lessons learned in this new season or this new normal. Now, to help us understand this just a little bit better, C.S. Lewis, many years ago in his book, The Problem of Pain, explores this very tension. Here's what he wrote. He wrote, my own experience is something like this. I am progressing along the path of life in my ordinary, contently fallen and godless condition, absorbed in a merry meeting with my friends for the morrow or a bit of work that tickles my vanity, when suddenly a stab of abdominal pain that threatens serious disease, or perhaps a headline in the newspaper that threatens all of us with destruction, sends the whole pack of cards tumbling down. At first, I'm overwhelmed and my little happiness looks like broken toys, but then, slowly and reluctantly, bit by bit, I try to bring myself into the frame of mind that I should be in at all times. And perhaps, by God's grace, I succeed for a day or two. I mean, isn't that our experience? And for a day or two, I become a creature consciously dependent on God, drawing in strength from the right sources. But the moment the threat is withdrawn, and you already know what comes next, don't you? And the reason you know, and the reason that I know, is because that's our story. We've been there. And for some of you, your story went like this 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. Your husband, your wife came to you one day and said, hey, if you don't change, I'm done. I'm out of here. We've talked and we've talked, we've counseled and we've counseled. I just don't see any permanent change. And suddenly he or she had your attention. You sat up straight. You began to make changes, right? You began coming home earlier. You started listening better. You paid more attention to the kids. You paid more attention to what he asked, what she asked. And suddenly you became a better husband. You became a better wife. And your marriage got better for a while. But the moment the threat was withdrawn, you began to retreat to your old ways, your old normal, your normal. And maybe your story is this. You had that scary physical and your doctor looked at you and said, look, we've talked about this before. And if you don't make some changes, you will not be around to play with your grandchildren. You're certainly not going to be around to play with your great-grandchildren. And he or she got your attention. And you went home and you got serious and maybe you dieted and you exercised and people began to say, hey, you're looking better. and you began to feel better, and everything was better. And for a while, you kind of stuck it out. But then what happened? Well, once the threat was withdrawn, you drifted back to the normal, right? All of these scenarios, and I'm sure there are a lot more, they make me think, what is wrong with us? Why do we have to be led to the brink of disaster before we are willing to make the changes we've all known we need to make? Back to C.S. Lewis, here's how he finishes this idea. But the moment the threat is withdrawn, my whole nature leads back to the toys. God has had me but for 48 hours, and then only by dint of taking everything else away from him. But let him sheath that sword for a moment. And here's what I want us to avoid, and this is why we're going to talk about this for the next few weeks, because in order for us to gain through this pain, we have to be intentional. Otherwise, we're all going to drift to the normal that we used to have and never learn anything from it. That's kind of why I wanted to poke and prod just a little bit for the next few weeks. Listen how he finishes. He says this, let him sheath that sword for a moment. And I behave like a puppy when the hated bath is over. And if you have dogs, you know exactly where this is going, right? I behave like a puppy that when the hated bath is over, I shake myself as dry as I can and I race off to acquire my comfortable dirtiness. If not in the nearest manure heap, at least in the nearest flower bed. Now here's the thing, and this is true for all of us. It is human nature to return to bad habits once the pain associated with those bad habits is gone. In other words, it's human nature to want to get back to whatever normal was. But here's the thing. Aspiring to normal, that's not very inspiring, right? So here's the question we're going to wrestle to the ground for the next couple of weeks. How can we be better for it? In other words, for some of us, don't let a good thing go to waste. But for some of us, maybe it's don't let a bad thing go to waste. And again, I don't know your circumstances, but my hunch is it's not too soon to begin taking inventory and to ask the question, what have I been doing that almost led to my undoing? What have I been doing that almost led to my undoing? Or the flip side is simply this, what should I begin doing that I should have been doing all along? So today, to get this discussion kicked off, I just want to talk about 3 specific areas. And honestly, the first 2, they're going to be a bit painful. Okay, you may feel like I'm being a little bit insensitive, that I'm doing more meddling than speaking or preaching, but I just want you to hang in there with me, because the reason it's going to become uncomfortable is because it feels like it's too soon to talk about this. But I want to tell you it's not too soon. While the pressure is on, this is the time when we learn the most. This is when we gain the most perspective. And what a shame it would be to lose these lessons and to lose these learnings and to lose this kind of perspective. So I want to talk about 3 areas today, and then next week I'm going to come back and we want to talk about your superpower. You have a superpower. Did you know that? You have a very special ability that empowers you to be better for anything you face in life. And so next week, we're going to come back and talk about your superpower, so don't miss next week. But to get us going today, here's number 1. How can you be better for it financially? How can you be better for what we just went through financially? What have you been doing that almost led to your undoing financially? Or perhaps, what have you been doing that actually led to your undoing financially? What financial habit caught up with you in this difficult season? Or to ask it another way, what do you wish you'd been doing financially that would have set you up to be in a better place right now? And whatever comes to mind, and I think you have an answer to this question, here's my challenge. Start that now. Now is the time to face up to 2 financial realities. In fact, there's several financial realities we all need to face up to, but if you will, use this pressure and chase that feeling that you're experiencing right now. And let's look at these 2 financial realities that are looming large, I think, for many of us. Number 1 is, I want is better than I owe. You've heard us talk about this. I mean, in other words, it is better to go without the things that you don't need than to owe money on things that you don't need. It's better to go without things you don't need than to owe money on things you don't need. There's a tension there. But the tension of I owe is far worse than the tension of I want. The second financial reality that I think looms large for each of us right now, and you're going to hate me for this, but a financial hole is always due in part to a lack of self-control. That a financial hole is always, but let's just say usually maybe, due to a lack of self-control. Let me illustrate it this way. Before the crisis, you had this thought, right? If only I had more money. If only I made more money. During the crisis, you had this thought. If only I had saved more money. Which is the same thing as saying, if only in the past I had exercised better self-control. A financial hole is usually due in part to a lack of self-control. And if you're facing the consequences of a lack of self-control financially, now is the time to write that down, to learn the lesson, and never ever do what you did in the past again, so that you would be ready for the future. In fact, the writer of Proverbs gives us a word picture that really is not really helpful in our current reality, in our current situation, especially in our current culture. But it's a very powerful word picture from ancient times. Here's what he wrote. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Again, for us, this is meaningless, but in ancient times, the walls around a city, they represented security. They represented peace and prosperity and safety for the people that were in those walls. And when an enemy would come, they would pick the weakest part of the wall, and they would use weapons of warfare to eventually break through and create a breach or a break in the wall, and the enemy would pour in to the city through the wall. And here's what the writer is saying, that a city, that when those walls are broken through, the people within the city, they lose their security. They lose their safety. They lose their autonomy. They lose their ability to control their own lives. And here's his point, that a lack of self-control leads to a loss of control. That a lack of self-control in any area of life ultimately leads to a loss of control. And let me ask you this. What do you want pretty much more than anything else in life? You want to be able to control your own life, don't you? And the key to having control of your life is actually to exercise self-control. And consequently, because of what we've just been through, you may be learning this lesson the hard way financially. And I want you to be better for it. You want to be better for it. Now is the time to take some of these simple ideas and elevate them so that you don't pass this way again. If in fact something like this were ever to happen again. I mean, a lack of self-control always leads to a loss of control. Now here's something you may have heard before. I bet somewhere in your past somebody either gave you this advice or you heard someone talking about this advice. And the advice was this, that you need to have 3 to 6 months of savings set aside in case of an emergency. I mean, for some of us that sounds crazy, right? But here's my hunch. When you heard that for the first time, I know I did, or maybe you read that in a book for the first time, you thought to yourself, that's a really good idea. And if you had taken that advice which requires extraordinary self-control, right, then you are better for what we have just been through. If you didn't take that advice, you're wishing you had. Now is the time to create a plan to set money aside in case there is another financial bump coming up. That way, when your walls are attacked, they will not be broken through because your self-control and creating an emergency fund has prepared you for the future. Decide to start to do that now. So how can you be better for it financially? Simple. And you've heard us maybe say this 1,000 times. Save more, spend less, get out and stay out of debt. Save more, spend less, get out and stay out of debt. One more thing on the financial peace idea. If this particular season has hit you particularly hard, your tendency will be to blame the virus, maybe your boss, maybe blame the economy. And I want to say that that's a mistake. Certainly the virus has contributed to it. Certainly your working situation, that has contributed to it. Certainly the economy has contributed to it. But here's what I want to say, and this might sound really harsh. Perhaps you contributed to your situation as well. And you must own your slice of the pie. Now is the time to own it, and now is the time to make decisions so that you never face this situation again. Take responsibility for your finances. Embrace all that common sense that you have heard your whole life. Exercise self-control and prepare for the future. Take notes, make a plan. Decide to be better for it. Next up, number 2 is how can we be better for it relationally? What have you experienced these past few months relationally that you want to carry forward into the future? I think one of the things that we've all experienced is the value of friendship and the value of friends. But there may be a negative side to all of this for you. And if so, I want you to pay attention. Perhaps you've noticed or you've experienced some unaddressed cracks in your marriage. Things that you sort of put outside to the periphery of your relationship, things that came up from time to time, but you were too busy, and the old normal allowed you to ignore that which was right in front of you. And perhaps, what you've noticed is a lack of common ground with your children. Maybe you lack a common ground with all of your kids. You're spending so much time with your family at the moment that you suddenly recognized, well, I've never really developed an actual relationship with one or maybe all of my kids because I've just been so busy. Isn't it true that quarantining has highlighted the good and the not so good relationally? I mean, here's the opportunity, and I don't want you to miss this. This is really important. COVID-19 may actually serve as a wake-up call to you relationally. If so, wake up. If there are cracks in your relationships at home, now now is the time to address them. Rushing back to the normal is going to empower you to just continue to ignore them. I mean, you know that relationship problems are not going to fix themselves. So now is the time to address these relationship issues. And before you begin pointing fingers, it's the same with your finances. You need to own your slice of the conflict pie. Own your slice of the conflict pie. In fact, if you get this right, your story of COVID-19 may just be this, that it was actually the catalyst that saved your marriage. That if you pay attention to this tension, if you do the difficult work that faces you right now, but rushing back to the normal will only allow what's bad to get even worse. Right now, what we're facing is forcing us to face what we have perhaps neglected. Perhaps your story will be this, that COVID-19 was a catalyst for repairing my relationship with my son, or it was a catalyst for repairing my relationship with my daughter. Relationally speaking, and I don't think we can exaggerate this, all of this pain with no gain would certainly be an extraordinary shame. Last thing, number 3, how can you be better for it personally? And when I say personally, I'm talking about internally. Let me ask it this way. How is your worldview holding up? You know what your worldview is, right? It's the way that you see and interpret and explain how the world works. And when difficult times come, sometimes our foundations are rocked. And if your foundation, your worldview has been rocked, you should pay attention to that. Do you find yourself asking questions that maybe you've never asked before? If you're not a particularly religious person, you find yourself praying for the first time maybe in a long time. Maybe you went and found a Bible. If you are a religious person, has your faith been rattled? Did you perhaps discover that your faith was more fragile than you imagined? Did you find yourself asking questions, or do you find yourself asking questions now that maybe you've never asked before? Questions like, where's God? How could God? Or I thought God would. Here's my point. Regardless of which side of the faith aisle you maybe find yourself on, if this current season has created tension on the inside, you need to pay attention to that tension. It means that you are on the verge of learning something new or being reminded of something that you have forgotten. It could lead somewhere good, and it could certainly lead to somewhere better. Author Kate Bowler said this, that there's a little bit of prosperity gospel in all of us. And the prosperity gospel is the gospel that says, well, basically good things happen to good people, and that bad things come to bad people, and what goes around comes around, and that you sort of earn your way through life, and that God favors certain kinds of people because of their behavior. And in spite of the fact that you may reject that kind of theology, I think she's right. There is a little bit of that kind of thinking in every single one of us, that God owes me, or if you don't believe in God, that life owes me, or karma owes me, because somebody owes me because I have been a good person, and I've lived a good life. Kate is actually a professor at Duke Divinity School, and she's also a cancer survivor, and she's written from her pain, really for the whole world to be able to see and to examine in an effort to help really people understand what it means to navigate difficult times. Her book's entitled Everything Happens for a Reason, and I love the subtitle, and Other Lies I've Loved. But when she was questioned about her comment that there's a little bit of prosperity gospel in all of us, here's what she said. She said that each of us, through the accidental narcissism of wanting to be happy, I mean, we all want to be happy, right? But in wanting to be happy, we get confused about what we actually deserve. She said that the world cannot help us know the difference between who is righteous and who is just plain lucky. Now, here's my point. If this season has kind of rocked your world in terms of your internal world, your worldview, or it's rocked your faith, pay attention to that tension. You may be on the verge of learning something new, or maybe on the verge of being reminded of something old. If current events have left you wrestling with God, questions, and maybe you're not a religious person, you've just assumed that you left that wrestling ring years ago, but now you find yourself wrestling with God, questions, and I want you to pay attention to that. And if you're a Christian, pay attention to that tension as well, because you may discover a different kind of faith. You may discover a better faith. You may discover a different version of faith. And perhaps in this season, you will finally give up your faith in a non-existent God who doesn't allow bad things to happen to good people. In this season, you may come face to face with the God who allowed the worst possible thing happen to the best possible person, his son. And he did that on your behalf. So the point is simply this. We're going to get through this. Things are going to become more normal. And let's make sure that we're going to be better for it. Let's make sure that we're better for it financially. Let's make sure that we're better for it relationally. And let's make sure that we are better for it personally. Because all of this pain without any gain would certainly be a shame. So let's face and embrace the lessons that we've learned. And for sure, let's face and embrace the perspective we've gained. Let's all decide that we're going to be better for it. Let's not do what C.S. Lewis referred to when he said, let's not behave like a puppy when the hated bath is over and this hated season will come to an end. That this hated bath will be over, but let's not race off to the nearest flower bed. And let's not certainly go and roll in the nearest manure heap. Let's not forget what we've learned. Let's not lose this perspective. And to help you do that, I want to make a suggestion. Now, some of you aren't going to like this, and that's fine. We're going to talk about this for 3 weeks. And some of you are going to love this, but because it's so easy for us to forget, because it's so easy for us to just move on, as you think about what you want to carry forward in the season, I want to encourage you to come up with a way to remember. In fact, I want to encourage you to actually create a reminder. Find a physical object. Perhaps you want to make a craft or make a physical object. Maybe it's something that you already own, and I want you to attach a memory to this object. Something that will remind you of this season and what you want to carry forward from it. And I want you to take this object, whatever it might be, and I want you to place it somewhere prominent in your life so that you see it and you are reminded. Maybe it'll simply be a reminder to slow down. Maybe it'll be a reminder of the value of friendships that you've neglected. Maybe it'll be a reminder to dig in and deal with the crack in your marriage and your relationships at home. Maybe it'll be a reminder to invest in that son or that daughter. That is not like you, and consequently, you've just had a hard time connecting with them over this time. Perhaps it's a reminder of who or what is most important. Perhaps it's simply a reminder of something we've all learned, that we have far more in common with the people around us than we actually thought. But I want you to come up with a reminder, and I want you to place it somewhere where you can be reminded. Because what we've learned and this perspective that we have gained, I want us to begin writing a better story as we all move forward. Because eventually, this whole season, it's simply going to be a story that we tell. And so how can I be better for it? And what will help me remember? How can I be better for it? And what will help me remember? Normal, or even this new normal, is right around the corner. I can't wait for us to get back there. I think we're all looking forward to it. But let's not miss this unprecedented and hopefully once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to learn everything we can and to gain the perspective that will serve us well in the future. Let's not merely settle for getting through this. Let's decide to be better for it. Now, next week, we're going to talk about your superpower. And you actually have a superpower. You have an ability to ensure that everything that comes your way makes you better. And you can be better for it. And so don't miss next week. As we've been doing recently, I've got some questions for you. And I would love it if you would discuss this with maybe whoever you're watching with. Maybe you're doing a small group over Zoom, or you have a group of friends that you discuss Sunday messages with, or maybe just discuss life with them. Here are 3 questions we should all wrestle to the ground before next week. Number 1, where have you felt the most pressure during the season? Was it financially, relationally, spiritually, something else? Number 2, is there anything you should have been doing that would have better prepared you for what you're currently experiencing? Is there anything you should have been doing that would have better prepared you for what we are currently experiencing? And number 3, what can you begin doing now? And that's where the tension lies, right now. What can you begin doing now to ensure that you will be better for it later? Discuss these questions with somebody, maybe a group of people, or at the very least, I would love for you to just carve out some time and spend some time processing these questions by yourself at some point today or this week. To close our time together, here are Steph and Talani with the song Waymaker.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. And even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are the waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. 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 That is who you are.
Oh, thanks so much for that, guys. I know that many of us, we want to be better for it, but some of us, we might need help through it. And if that is the case, I would love it if you would head over to our website, southpointchurch.co.za, and scroll down to where it says virtual community. And I'd love for you to send an SOS form, or maybe just fill out the request prayer form. We would love to hear from you, and we would certainly love to pray for you. And in fact, I would love to pray for us right now, so let's do that. Father God, help us to be better for it. Help us to know you better. Help us to be better friends, better neighbors, better husbands, better wives, better children. Help us to be better for it. Father God, I pray that when we look back on this season, what we would recognize is that you were there. You were at work around us, and that you were at work inside of us. Thank you for sending Jesus to experience life just like we do, and that he willingly chose to go to the cross to save each and every one of us. It's in his name we pray. Amen.